We're recording this interview with Kea Stanley on Monday, June 8th, 2020. Kea, you and your husband own a restaurant group here in Reno, Nevada. The restaurant industry has been one of the hardest hit by recent events. First, there was a government-prescribed shutdowns due to COVID-19, and before you had even a chance to recover from that, you were facing riots related to the recent racial tensions facing our country right outside your restaurant. Please give us a sense of what this whole time has been like for you.
Well, first with the shutdown, the day that we got the notice that we had to shut our dining room doors, it was just, there was so much uncertainty and panic. You know, restaurants have to be open to make money to be able to pay the employees. So the first thoughts that were going through my head anyway were, what's going to happen to these people who rely on us? You know, these are people who we pay them and they have families, and I was wondering how they were going to eat. I was worried about how we were going to pay our bills because, you know, the landlords still want to get paid. We still had bills to pay. So I was worried about that. I was worried about our own family. We have 2 kids in college, and I didn't know what this was going to do to our finances, if we were going to lose everything. And then also if anyone was going to ever go into restaurants again, because the restaurants became, people were really afraid to go out, but especially in restaurants. And then social media during that time was a nightmare because people were, some businesses closed and then were super judgmental of restaurants or businesses that stayed open. So it caused us, and we were questioning ourselves. We didn't know what the right thing to do. Should we close? Should we stay open? So just the uncertainty of all of it. And then you're right. So we had barely gotten through COVID, just about to start opening. And then the racial tensions hit, the murder of George Floyd, the first week of the protests, there was a peaceful protest, and my daughter and I were actually at the peaceful protest that day. And that night, we were home, my husband and I were home, and we got a call from our staff saying that they were trapped inside the restaurant, and there were people outside with machine guns. So my husband loaded a couple guns and went downtown to get our staff out and our patrons and get the staff home safely. And it was the most terrifying hour of my life. I called a couple of our friends and I asked them to go meet him down there. And talk about, that was just, it was terrifying. I was terrified of what was going to happen to him, the people, and then we were watching on the news while buildings were being trashed. So not as worried about for their lives, but still worried what's going to happen if now our windows get smashed in and what's going to happen there. So the whole thing was, the uncertainty and the fear of that whole couple of months was just paralyzing and debilitating.
And yet, you didn't stay paralyzed. You did some very specific things that you say guided you through these really tough times. Can you tell us more about that?
That's exactly right. So we didn't know what we were doing as we were doing it, but in hindsight, we did some very specific things. And there were 3 things we did. The first thing was, in all of the moments of uncertainty, we stayed specifically focused on what was needed in the community by people, but focusing on the need was the first thing. The second thing that we did was we focused on giving, not about how we were going to make money. We're a for-profit business, but we didn't make that our focus. We focused on giving. And then the third thing that we did was giving without expecting anything in return. And I can give you the examples of how we used it. So the first one was, we own a restaurant and the dining room had to shut down. And you can't make money if you can't seat your dining room. So that very first day that our governor shut down our restaurants, we immediately said, what's the need? The need was people couldn't find toilet paper. And that was the biggest thing, toilet paper and sanitizers. So we said, well, we're a restaurant. We have all of these distributors that we can get all these supplies, and we could still get toilet paper. We had no shortage of anything ever during this whole time. So we put a website up that day and started selling toilet paper, eggs, lunch meat, you name it, hand sanitizers, and it really took off, and we ended up staying open for carryout. We didn't make any money during this time. I mean, everything was down about 90%, and we weren't marking up the toilet paper and all the groceries very much. It was really just about getting those supplies to people that needed it, and we specifically focused on anyone could order from us, but we specifically marketed to the people who couldn't or shouldn't go to grocery stores because they were compromised and they were more at risk. So so it was seniors and people who had surgeries and things. Like, the word got out really fast, and the other people we marketed to were the doctors and nurses and people working in the COVID ICUs, because these were people that were exposed directly to the virus and shouldn't be going to grocery stores. So they could order online, and we would sometimes special order all of their groceries, or we had stuff there and they could come pick it up curbside and never have to go into a store. So that was a huge pivot. But it was the focus was never making money. It was about how do we help and how do we meet the need. The second thing that we did was this was all happened on that first day that the governor announced the shutdown. We got a call. One of our locations is in Midtown, Reno, and we have live music there. And one of our musicians, who is our regular Friday night musician, also is a nurse at St. Mary's in the COVID ICU. And she told us that day that she was not eating because they had shut down the cafeterias. And she also, because she was in the COVID ICU, she was having to quarantine away from her children. She's a single mom, 4 kids. And the caregiver that stays with the kids was at risk. So to keep her kids safe and cared for, and to keep the caregiver from getting sick, she was quarantined away from her own children. And then they weren't leaving the units to eat because they have to do this long, extensive scrub out and scrub in process. So they would be leaving their patients and their colleagues alone for an hour. So we said, the need was, she's not eating. So we said, let's go take her food. Then we said, well, let's take the whole unit food. Then we said, well, heck, let's not stop at the one hospital. Let's go to the other hospital too. So there was 2 hospitals that we fed. It was 130 meals. And we took meals to them for the first, I think, 3 or 4 days. And just we're doing it ourselves, and then again put up another website, and the website people started pouring in money. We made, I think, $12,000 just in the first week, and that's how Feed Our Heroes was started. And then that was again pretty amazing. And the third thing that we did was we talked a little bit about the riots that happened just as we were coming off of COVID. It was so disheartening to see, all these restaurants that were trying, and all the businesses that were trying to recover from that. Then the hit of the riots was just windows broken in. There was graffiti all over downtown. And when my husband came home that night after he went and got all of our staff out, by that time, we did have the benefit of seeing how we used this process during the COVID shutdown. And so that time we more, I think, intentionally said, well, how can we help? What's the need? And so that night we called all of our friends, half the city council, and our friends that own businesses downtown, and said, hey, we're going to do a cleanup. And so we announced a cleanup for the next day, and we announced it on Facebook. That Facebook post was shared over 500 times in less than an hour, and there were 65,000 impressions on that post. And we had, so we announced that we were going to do a cleanup from our location. We had, we offered free food, and a couple other restaurants in town did it with us. We offered free food. We provided all the supplies. And it was one of the coolest things I've seen this community do. It far outweighed the negativity of the riots the night before. Thousands of people came through to clean. They were bringing supplies. They were leaving and getting supplies and bringing more. It was such a healing moment for the community. It was a really beautiful thing to see.
Kea, you did something really interesting in here that you haven't touched on yet. You raised $12,000 for Feed Our Heroes in that first week, but you didn't keep it for yourself. You chose to give it away to other restaurants. Even though you just told us you were so scared about how much money you were losing. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's right. So we got $12,000 just in the first couple of days. And we had a minute where we said, should we keep this for ourselves? Because it can keep our restaurant going. And there were a lot of restaurants that did that raised money and kept it for themselves. And so there was a minute where we thought, are we stupid business people to not keep it and, pay our staff? But we really realized that one of the needs was that the restaurant industry was hit so hard and that the restaurants were struggling. And we knew that if we raised that money, and that was just the first couple of days. So it kept going up and up. People were walking in, bringing us $6,000 checks, $5,000 checks. And we realized that if we used that money to help the whole restaurant industry, it would be far more powerful than just us doing it. And that was one of the reasons why it was hard for us during those early days to go on social media, and the news was covering it a lot, because we weren't doing it to toot our own horns. We were doing it to raise awareness, because the more money that was coming in, we were able to pay every restaurant that delivered food $10 a meal. That kept some lights on for restaurants. We got calls from a lot of restaurants saying, you've kept my staff employed. This was a big thing that helped a lot of people. And in hindsight, that was the exact right thing to do, because it included so many different members of the community. So many people wanted to be part of it. There was 3 things that Feed Our Heroes did. One was we were feeding only the COVID ICU and ERs and testing centers. So we weren't the ones, there was a lot of people giving food to hospitals. Ours was a very concerted effort. We worked directly with the hospitals on where to deliver, when to deliver, how many meals to deliver. And we ended up joining with another organization started by a local surgeon here. And we combined it because they were doing breakfast and lunch, and our group was doing dinner. And because of those 2 groups together, we did breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week for 8 weeks. For over 20 testing sites, and we had over 20 restaurants that we were able to reimburse as we did that. The other things that happened, though, because it became such a movement, were massive. We had distributors coming and bringing pallets of waters and beer. And we had a grower bringing in. They gave us pallets of food, and we immediately just distributed that out to our member restaurants. Some of them made food that they made for the heroes, and then we had other times that those restaurants made food for industry workers who were out of work. So it ended up helping in so many different ways. We also were taking food to Boys and Girls Club, because we learned that Boys and Girls Club was staying open to watch the kids of the healthcare workers. So that also fit within our mission. And just the outpouring of support. We ended up doing a concert in front of one of the hospitals, and we arranged a drive-by for all of the first responders from all the neighboring cities and counties, and we had fire, police, sheriff, EMS. They all did this amazing drive-by, but the community support of that was so much bigger because it included giving it away to everybody else. My husband and I actually only kept one night for ourselves, and the rest of it we made sure that other restaurants were making the money from it. So it really was amazing.
So I have to ask, now that you've lived through this, you clearly have so many insights. What would you have done differently if you could?
Not a thing. Like I said, we didn't know what we were doing as we did it. We didn't realize this pattern. In hindsight, everything happened perfectly. We had to be in that much fear. We had to be that scared. We had to be that uncertain. We had to have everything at risk to have learned and had the insights that we had. And now, though, I feel like I have a tool that anything that happens in my life, if I feel that uncertain and panicky, I know that if I just focus on what is the need, how can I fill the need? If I focus on how do I give to someone that is in need, and if I focus on giving without expecting anything in return, that's now a framework that I have for my life.
Kea Stanley, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.